Happy Sunday, everyone. It's quite a pleasure to have this actually going and have Galia in front of my screen and seeing who's joined us this afternoon. So this is really quite special. I guess I'll start up a little bit slow as more people start to sign in and attend. But some of you may know Galia's work. This is her second exhibition at Track 16, solo exhibition. She also was part of a group show that was here last spring that came because she introduced me to the group, the Binder of Women, and they are a really interesting collective of women who are trying to find, sort of strength and perseverance through all the hardships that being an artist, most of them being in California, originally when they got together in the group were California, go through. And so it was a group that I found a lot of inspiration learning about a lot of them. So I do have an announcement. So this was supposed to be a conversation between Anu, Vikram, and Galia, and we did have an emergency today. So Anu is not able to join us. We're both very sorry that she's not able to attend. She's fine. Her family's fine. We're finding out everything's fine. It was just I had a quick scare with like a small child injury, nothing broken type of thing. But anyway. So we're really sad. It's slightly possible if everything goes great, she might join us later in the talk. But at the moment, she is attending to family stuff. So we didn't want to reschedule because people were probably popping in for some Sunday time that they blocked out. So as much as we really miss having her here and her insights, we're going to move forward with the talk today. And she did actually send over what she was planning, some of the stuff she was planning to ask Galia. So I will be also incorporating that into the talk. So we'll get some of the directions that she was planning to take this talk in. I'm going to read a bit of Galia's bio, and then I'll talk a little bit more about her, and we'll go a little bit from there. So. A lot of you know her, but what we wrote for this show is very clearly is she's a sculptor and site specific artist. She does installations, and really a way that she has kind of tried to address what she's coming from is she's constructing relationships between subject, object, and their environments by creating elemental tensions. And when I read that right now, it sounds like a really quite effective way of starting to talk a little bit about where she's going with the work, because that's definitely something that I was attracted to right away. So I visited her studio over 2 years ago, and not knowing much about her or her work, but I saw one or two images and was compelled to visit and learn more and get to know her more. And when I saw the work, I was really kind of overwhelmed, because I feel like for me, especially at that time, 2 years ago, when we were looking at it, it was work that was really speaking to me. It was work that I felt like it was making me feel a little more. It was making me feel a little less unknown. And I sometimes my nature goes towards works that have a little more, maybe there's more surface story to them, or narratives, or things that are a little more overtly political and such. And so the idea that Galia was taking me to this other new world, that I felt like, oh wow, it was very apparent right away that I wanted to go further and find out more about this work. And so that was one of the things that inspired me to get to know her. And then we did our first show. It was 2 years ago, I guess. I don't even remember now. So about 2 years ago, we did an exhibition here that mainly consisted the basis for which was 4 out of 6 of these large pieces that were so stunning that we had here. That and installing that show gave me a sense of, it made me relate to what she'd been saying in her studio, because sometimes when an artist talks about the process being so important, as an outsider, sometimes it can be hard to relate. You think that maybe sometimes it almost sounds like the thing you're supposed to say, maybe from the outside. But when we were installing the work, the mass, the shapes, the textures, and just the struggle to deal with the sometimes very unwieldy large pieces that she works with really got me into her skin a little bit. And so that show happened 2 years ago, and here we are in 2021. And what Gali would tell to me whenever I saw her as we were preparing the show, I would visit the studio, is the thing that was obviously exciting for her was the idea of planning for a solo exhibition, and the idea of, instead of, I've made all these works, let's see what we can do with a space. And so instead, for this show, she took to heart the idea of sharing a space that she's created for, maybe mainly almost for herself in mind, but also for others to share and come to her point of view. So I'm going to, maybe I'll let Galia get one word in, but we're going to play a video, and then we're going to do a Q&A. But Galia and I created a sort of video that sort of lets her collect her thoughts on where she was coming from to create this exhibition. Galia, do you want to say anything before I put the video on?
Yes, I want to say thank you to you for giving me this opportunity to take the work out of the studio, and for our dialogue in preparing for this show. I really, really appreciate that. And for everyone that's joining us here today. And we're sending warm thoughts to Anu and her family. And let's get rolling.
Okay, so hello again, my attendees out there in the internet. I'm going to put this video on. So let me.
Hi, I'm Galia Lin. Welcome to Beauty Queen, Heartbreaker, High Maintenance at Track 16 Gallery. Track 16 Gallery is on the 10th floor at the Bendix Building, downtown Los Angeles. Developer Florence Kessler, who in the 1920s stood out in the male-dominated commercial real estate business, put together an empire that came to include at least 10 downtown buildings worth an estimated $7 million in 1926. The Bendix was her last development before the stock market crash and the Great Depression hit. Today, it is home to fashion businesses, artist studios, galleries, and dance studios. Over the past 25 years, I have been obsessed over Neolithic cultures. The architecture, objects, images are very compelling to me. Perhaps because those cities, home to as many as 5,000 to 7,000 inhabitants at a time, were proto-cities. Meaning, as the ruins are showing, there was no hierarchy. All buildings are equal. There was no separation between life and death. Bones of ancestors were brought into living quarters and buried inside the home. And lastly, evidence has shown that men and women were treated with equality. In 2020, I was planning a trip to visit some of these sites, but all these travel plans were scrapped. So I began reclaiming these rituals and making them in a way that was empowering to me. This show is a result of decades of research into a more equal society and reclaiming rejection. The name of the show, Beauty Queen, Heartbreaker, High Maintenance, came from the 3 pinks I used throughout the show. The paints are from Home Depot, and they are regular house paints. As you enter the gallery, you encounter a mezuzah. A mezuzah is an object that hangs in the doorway of Jewish households. It is a small vessel that holds a scroll with a prayer. I always assumed a mezuzah was a guardian, a symbol that represents our relationship between people and God, in which He promises to protect the home. As I was reading the prayer hidden inside the mezuzah, I discovered it is a command and a threat. It is a command to love God and a threat that if you don't, then you and everyone in the household will suffer. I was wondering, can you really command someone to love you? My mezuzah is a guardian. It is large and pink. Nothing is hidden, and it offers a connection to joy. I have always been interested in a relationship between spaces, objects, people, and rituals. Over the past 15 years, I've created multiple places, both permanent and temporary. This past year, I gave myself permission to create such a place for myself. At the center of the installation is Womb Tomb. Every now and then, I get an urge to crawl into a corner and disappear. This past year, this urge came on very frequently. So I created Womb Tomb in response to this feeling. There are 6 stones placed in a circle. I often work in groups of 6. Many cultures have relationships with the number 6. 6 is considered the most harmonious of all single-digit numbers. The most important influence of the 6 is its loving and caring nature. Properly nicknamed the motherhood number, it is all about sacrificing, caring, healing, protecting, and teaching others. And so I had this stone in the studio for many years. There was something about its shape that I found beautiful. I have been making large stone guardians like the ones that are in the show for a while, and I was ready to explore other shapes and sizes. I wrapped the stone with clay. Once the clay set a little, I cut it open and reconnected it to make it whole again, then fired and glazed multiple times. I considered these tapestries as a self-portrait. These drapes were hanging in my bathroom and bedroom for over 12 years. I took them down so I could take them to the dry cleaning, and he told me that there's a chance they will fall apart because they are old. I took a second look, realizing that they have witnessed my life and hold all those memories. Why would I want to erase it all? I make vessels and guardians, exploring their relationship between strength and vulnerability. For this new body of work, I use new bodies of clay, glazes, and firing techniques, stretching size, temperature, and glazing so that I can create a conversation between clay, organic glazes, and metallic ones. When I was building mezuzah and Womb Tomb, I realized that I will need to paint them vertically, which would be a new thing for me, because when I sketch and paint, I do it horizontally. So I collected the plywood pieces I had in the studio, covered them in stucco, and began painting. I was completely absorbed in the viscosity, smell, and vibrancy of the paint. It felt like a moment of channeling what was outside myself into the form of a guardian or a totem. Over the years, I have accumulated small stones from multiple firings, stones that have broken off from large pieces. I kept them all. This past year, they became precious objects to be wrapped and protected. These building blocks were created as glaze samples. I have begun exploring new glazes and needed to do some samples on different clay bodies, firing schedules, and temperature. Normally, glaze samples are done on a tile, but I don't do 2D objects, so I wanted to see what the glaze would look like on a 3D body. There are 36 building blocks, 2 times 18. In the Jewish alphabet, every letter has a number. The number 18 make the word chai, which means alive. It is customary to give multiple of 18 for life celebrations. These works are a part of an offering in which 1/3 of the funds will go towards supporting Arts at Blue Roof, a newly launched nonprofit in District 9 in South LA. More specifically, funds will support a Room of One's Own, an artist residency for women and women-identified artists of all disciplines. The residency will provide a studio, stipend, exhibition space, and a mentorship network. Thank you for joining me on a video tour of Beauty Queen, Heartbreaker, High Maintenance at Track 16 Gallery.
Well, welcome back. Yeah, we thought that would be nice to. We were planning on making a video anyway, and we thought it would be nice to open with that because it would just be a clear way of giving a quick tour of the show with some video that wasn't me jiggling my phone around the space while Gali was talking with Anu. So I'm going to start. I'm going to talk a little bit. I'm going to start with Anu's questions, and Anu also she also wrote an essay for the catalog. We have a we were really proud to put out a catalog for Galia's exhibition, and we had a few people do contributions to this catalog that were very effective and helpful. And one was a poem by a friend of the gallery and collaborator of Galia's, by Amanda, and then Nikki Green also did a conversation with Galia in the catalog where they have a discussion. But then Anu wrote a very interesting essay that really gets to the heart of a lot of the material. And so I'm going to be using some of her questions that sort of continues this conversation that the two of them have been having about this work for a while now. But I thought I would, because she can't be here, maybe she'll still join in. I really doubt it because she's dealing with a child who got a bit injured. But before I start using these questions, I'm going to read about Anu a little bit. So Anu Vikram is a Los Angeles-based writer, curator, and educator. She is currently guest curating exhibitions with UCLA Art Sci Center and Craft Contemporary. And she's held positions, curatorial positions at 18th Street Art Center, UC Berkeley's Department of Art and Practice, Department of Art Practice, Headland Center for the Arts, and in the studios of artists Klaus Oldenburg and Cozy van Bruggen. And her book, Decolonizing Culture, addresses race and gender parity in contemporary art spaces. She is faculty in the UCLA Department of Art and the USC Roski School of Art and Design, and she's also a member of the editorial board of Extra and an editor for X Topics, a subsidiary of X Artist Books. So with that done, I'm going to go with it was interesting when Galia, sort of led how she wanted this video to be done by creating a script kind of what she wanted to talk about. And as you guys heard, she wanted to address the place where she chose to have, this installation that's in this gallery. This gallery is in the building called the Bendix Building, which we talked about in the video, which has become quite a space for arts in Los Angeles. When we moved here, there was one small gallery. Habib had a Post gallery on the 5th floor, which Post is defunct at the moment or again. And but now there's quite a few artist collectives in this building, and there's 3 commercial galleries plus Jones nonprofit space, but beyond that, there's just many art studios. So as Track 16 was at Bergamot Station for a very long time, and there was great camaraderie, for many periods of time between galleries and such. But there's something also very special about being in a building just with a lot of artist studios and being close to the artists. And so they're always around, and I'm very lucky to be here. And so Galia talked about the developer of the building. She created these very unique buildings in this Gothic Renaissance style that were these mixed-use industrial buildings, and she wanted them to stand out and hold the test of time. And I'm assuming this was a style that she really liked, and they're simple and utilitarian on the inside, and on the outside, they have a lot of ornamentation that doesn't seem to go over the top, but it's very compelling. Makes the buildings even feel a little mysterious. So to read her question, you opened your walkthrough with the story of the Bendix Building developer Florence Kassler, who is one of the very few women to construct commercial real estate buildings in downtown LA in the 1920s. You also mentioned making vessels and guardians in your work. Can you speak to your own background in architecture and spatial design and how you relate to Florence Kassler creatively and politically?
Gladly. So I'll go around it in a roundabout way. In 1976, Laurel Thatcher Ulrich, who was a Pulitzer Prize-winning historian, wrote an essay about Puritan funeral rites performed by pious women of colonial New England. And it had this now very famous quote that says that well-behaved women seldom make history. And she noticed over the decades after that how that quote got appropriated and became part of pop culture, right? On T-shirts and cups and what have you. And she felt it took it to not the way she meant it. So decades later, she wrote a book, the same title, that says "Well-Behaved Women Seldom Make History." And in the book, she talks about how women did shape history, and she gives example of Rosa Parks and Virginia Woolf and Harriet Tubman. And what I really love about it is that the idea that you have to misbehave to be recognized as a woman is not very appealing to me. The quote at the end of her book is just that well-behaved women do make history when they do the unexpected, when they keep and maintain, when they make and maintain records, and when future generations care. So I think in some ways what we're doing here is, I mean, this building, this is a legacy of Florence Kessler, and this is her record making, and we care and we talk about her. And so that's kind of the relationship to the building. And that was very important to me because spaces, places, buildings, there's an energy to them. There's a relationship between the people and the objects that are in them. And this is something that I like to always explore in my practice, how it all comes together and creates a place of whatever ritual you want to bring into the space.
And because besides the fact that she was one of the few developers of architecture in downtown LA, she definitely ran into a lot of blockades. One of the main reasons the Bendix building and the other buildings that she created it right in this complex down here, that where a number of her buildings still stand, the Bendix being maybe considered the most grand because of the 40 or 4 or 5 story sign on the roof that flies way up into the sky, is that they wouldn't let her, they started to stop her from being able to develop right in the core, that the boys club of developers. And so that's when she grabbed a hold of this property down here and said, well, okay, well, I'm going to do what I'll go outside the bounds of which you guys are controlling and stopping me and do something. And it's one of the reasons the Bendix actually has these incredible views also, is because that she just decided to build these really tall buildings like away from the core. And so nothing of this size was built anywhere around here, for it's been 90 years. And continuing along, where do you see how do you feel like what brought you, like you went into, you studied architecture and then you moved into this world of creating objects, of creating art objects, creating spaces, experiences. And obviously, sometimes it can be a complex difference of space between the design and art making. Sometimes there's a lot of design can be based on some very, designers sometimes create very complex or simple sets of aesthetics that they like to almost live their lives by as a designer, as an architect sometimes. But an artist is, maybe that road's a little different. I'm curious how you feel about your connection to like just artistic practice and how some of your training comes into what you do.
So, growing up in Israel a long time ago, I was not exposed to fine art. Being an artist was not a thing. But as a child, I was always building things. There was this little building blocks that they gave us to study math, and I was always building sculptures and rooms. And so after my army service, when I got older, they channeled me into architecture, which I did for many years. I learned how to use drafting software by myself. The little animation video that you opened the video with, this is animation I did almost 30 years ago. So I practiced this for a long time, and it was really detached for me. It didn't work out for me. It was, so I became an artist later in life. And then I kind of started, actually clay was the way for me to go back to become an artist. And so I started working with clay. But I think what happened to me at some point, I realized is that all the years that I spent in architecture, understanding structure, understanding rhythm, allowed me when I'm doing my art practice to break the rhythm.
Yes.
And architecture has to make sense. In my art making, it's okay to not make sense. And I think that brings me joy. That's kind of what I enjoy doing.
So I'm going to head to another of the news questions. You mentioned that you learned to paint vertically in order to make the large sculptural works on view. Is learning new methods an integral part of your practice? And how has your approach to medium and scale changed as you developed your work?
So, clay is the bookend of my practice. It's the beginning and the end. But I do like to constantly explore new materials, new methods of production. It's, I feel like kind of going to that place where you're uncomfortable. It rewires your brain. And it just makes you look at things differently. And also, I think every project has it just tells me it needs different things. And so you just go with it. Right now, I'm starting a new body of work and I'm learning how to watercolor. Artist Molly Segal is helping me with that, it's teaching me, which is, it's really nervous, makes me really nervous and uncomfortable. But there's something really, liberating about not being attached to one thing or another, and really allowing the project to tell you where it needs to go, what materials it needs, and what method of production you should take.
And then, speaking to her, what she asked about the scale. Obviously, you're someone who sometimes works that can be very like palm size almost. And this isn't something unique to you at all, but especially with clay, there's something that because of the hand involved in creating this, the scale must do something for you and do something that you're intending for the viewer to experience.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. So there is a concept called phenomenology, and phenomenology is a study of our subconsciousness. There's a structure to our subconsciousness when we're interacting, when we're having a first-person body interaction with an object. And scale has a lot to do with this. And so when you interact with one of the large stone guardians, I mostly work really large because there's this physicality, both for myself in making the work, because the whole body is involved in making the work, but also the viewer has an experience with their body because the sculpture is as large as the kiln will allow me to go with, and it's very close to human scale. So I feel like this experience you're having, it's not intellectual, it's not a thinking or a feeling, it's like this knowing that you feel in your body, and that's very important to my practice, which is why I like to do installations where you become a part of the work. Like Womb Tomb, you can actually go into Womb Tomb because I want you to experience it with all your senses, with your body.
And so do you sometimes, obviously there must be times when you think, what am I doing? I mean, these pieces are really big. Do you ever question yourself a little bit? Because sometimes be like, oh my God, what am I getting myself into again? It seems like they can be overwhelming. This isn't a big, deep question. I'm just curious if you sometimes look and be like, oh my, here I am with this really big piece.
So are you referring to the time when we were moving the pieces to the gallery and we needed the gantry because, to lift those things, and I was telling you, that has to be an easier way to make a living. I do, but This is what they need to be.
Yeah.
And I need to be in this place. That's why I also work on several pieces at the same time. Not only they're large, but I also work on them on several pieces at the same time, because I need that physicality. I need to get to that place where I don't think. Your body's like exhausted, and you're just going through this way of working where there's no intent, there's no thought. It's just you become a vessel and you're channeling what needs to happen. And I think size and the physicality of the work has a lot to do with that. So I mean, just like my mother said, but can't you do anything easy? It's like, no. Unfortunately. No.
And so also I'd like to mention to all of our attendees that you can, at the bottom of your screen, I believe, you can enter the Q&A area if you guys have a question. After I get through questions with Galia, I will look to the Q&A and I'll address the questions that come in from our audience. I see Jessica already has one in there. So so feel free, if there's anything you're curious about or want to discuss or like her to get in on more, we'll look to that in a few minutes. Anu's next thing she wanted to talk about was you spoke how the mezuzah prayer is a command and a threat that demands we respond with love. How do you think that belief and love are gendered in your work and in your life?
That's a really good question, in a perfect Anu, very deep and thoughtful. So I want to thank her for that. I grew up in Israel. My family was not very religious, my immediate family, but my grandparents were. And I remember there were a lot of traditions that were involved in my upbringing. And I remember as a child feeling really uncomfortable with a lot of them, feeling a lot of rejection. I mean, I can give you 2 examples. I remember, I think I was 10 maybe, and I asked my grandmother, who had this beautiful, thick white hair. I think I inherited her hair. She was covering it. She was wearing a wig, and I asked her, well, why are you covering it? And she would say, well, God told me to. And it didn't make sense to me because it was so beautiful, because God gave it to her, but why is she covering it? I didn't understand. And then I remember another episode in high school. I went to a secular high school, but they were offering Talmud studies, and I took it. There was something about the intellectual sparring of the back and forth and the questioning of interpreting basically the Bible, the Old Testament, and that I really enjoyed. And I went to my grandfather, who was an engineer. I guess some of that, it kind of runs in the family, the engineer and architecture or whatever. And I was so proud of myself, and I showed him, hey, I'm studying this. And he said, well, girls can't study this. Girls can't study the Talmud. So I really felt like, because I'm a girl, all these traditions don't apply to me, and I felt like I was being rejected. And I think, so I rejected it all. And I think that in the last couple of years, and actually really preparing for this show, it became clear to me that these traditions are a part of me. And so if I'm rejecting them, I'm rejecting myself. And obviously that's not very healthy. And so I started kind of reclaiming these traditions and remaking them from a place of love, a place of acceptance, and a place of joy. So it's kind of bringing those things together and finding peace. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. So, moving on, continuing with the mezuzah work. It's a grand reinterpretation of it. It's very bold. It's the imagery of it is not what you would may expect. So, can you address a little more straight on, maybe like a little bit? Obviously, some of the imagery that makes up the mezuzah and the womb tomb relate a little bit to your studies of some of these ancient sites and ancient and proto-cities. But yeah, can you talk a little bit more about, maybe this is a good time to discuss, like, where did the pink come into this whole, obviously pink is just a color to choose in some ways, but it's also a loaded color and it's also, we can just tell by the title of the exhibition, Beauty Queen, Heartbreaker, High Maintenance, that these colors are coded by society, by marketing, by 20th century advertising for what we're supposed to believe they relate to. And so maybe you could talk a little bit about the creation of Mezuzah.
Sure. So I think that to me, this show is actually a relationship or a conversation between research that I've been doing for over 25 years into this Neolithic society. And as I talk about in the video, and then the title of our first show was Evidence of Care. When you look at some of these societies and some of the images and the culture and the rituals that are coming out of those Neolithic society, specifically in Turkey, in sites called Çatalhöyük, as I say, there is evidence of equality between men and women. There is evidence that there's no separation between life and death. There is evidence that we are able to live in a way that is more compassionate and more caring. And so when I was drawing inspiration from these cultures, I was trying to bring these objects or mirror of things that want to come back into existence. So we are capable of caring. These relics can show us. And so when I kind of started reviewing some of the traditions and rituals and objects in my own life, I kind of started merging those two together, coming from a place of compassion and equality, and bringing back the joy that exists in some of these traditions that exist in my upbringing. Like, for instance, the building blocks, the number 36, it's 2 times 18, which is high. There's a lot of beauty in those. And so this is how it came to be. And, the color pink, obviously it's very different than what I've done before because all my glazes, I've only shown clay so far, and all my glazes are very organic and muted. And this is not a glaze, and this is pink over stucco. By the way, stucco is a really yummy material to work with. I highly recommend it. A part of me, I really wanted to connect with joy, and I really wanted to reclaim what femininity means to me. And so I went immediately into, and they're strong. And they brought me a lot of joy when I was painting and working with them.
This relates slightly to the one question we have up so far, since it's related to this, I'm gonna bring this out now. Jessica Howe is asking, I'm curious about why you chose to use house paint. It has a very different feel than the glaze. So you chose a house paint for these when you went and started buying paints.
So I knew I wanted to use stucco. I have a piece at the Craft Contemporary Clay Biennale, and I built a pedestal for it. And since it needed to be outside, by the way, my work can always be outside, I used stucco. And that was the first time I ever worked with stucco, and I really liked it. And so I knew I wanted to build Mezuzah in Umtum with stucco, and it just, since it's construction material, it just made a lot of sense to use construction material. But I think there's a bigger thing, a deeper thing is I don't believe in the preciousness of things, which is to say they can be sacred but not precious. So I like to use everyday materials. And I have to tell you, these paints, there's something about the smell of them and how they, the viscosity, it was amazing to work with. Very satisfying. They have a three-dimensionality that is similar to the glaze.
Yeah, because a house paint, or even, whether interior, exterior, is, pretty much pours like a cream as compared to an acrylic that you might push out of a tube from an art supply store. So obviously that made that verticalness made it, I'm sure, challenging at moments as you were trying to create line and shape, and especially trying to paint something horizontal when it all wants to drip down. And obviously you're playing with the process, you're letting the process, it's a conversation almost with what's happening in this physical world as you're making it to create something. But let me take a look at the next thing we have here from Anu. You also spoke about the urge to crawl into a corner and disappear. and you're creating Womb Tomb, and you're creating Womb Tomb in response. Can you speak to how the last year and the last 4 years of larger historical events have affected your practice? You put it together, where she's going?
Where to begin? Yeah, sure. Where to begin? I think the last 4 years, and especially this past year, there was a lot of anxiety and fear and heaviness in the air. And it made me really question, what does it mean to be an artist? What's the role of an artist? What can I do as an artist? And so in 2016, it was paralyzing. I have to say, especially this last year, there were long period of time were paralyzed. I was feeling paralyzed, but you can't stay paralyzed long. And I started kind of thinking again, what can I do? And in 2016, I founded Blue Roof Studio, which is an art hub in South LA that offers artists affordable studio places, a place for exhibition, and an environment with community. And then we did a lot of community programming. Obviously, with COVID, we couldn't do that anymore. So last year, we started a nonprofit, and it's called Arts at Blue Roof. And we started an artist residency for women and women-identified artists. And Anu actually was helping me shape this residency. So we've had a lot of conversations about all those issues. We now have an executive director, Lisa Diane Wedgeworth, that is running the residency, and she's also an amazing artist. So that part is emotion. And in parallel, I think that with my own art making, especially this was the first time where I actually was allowed to prepare for a show. And you and I have had amazing dialogue throughout this year, because there was all kinds of ideas and what it needs to be. And then through our conversation, things got, more directed, more focused, and that was very helpful. And so I was having a lot of conversations with myself, and I wrote down some of the questions I was asking myself. I kept asking myself, what kind of art do you want to make? And myself was answering, well, I want to make the kind of art that brings me joy. And then I was asking myself, well, what brings you joy? And then myself said, I said to myself, I'm sorry, I lost all my self things. Anyway, I said, being true to myself. And so now whenever I work, it was almost like going through a threshold. Whenever I do work, is this bringing me joy? Am I doing it for myself? And the answer has to be unequivocally yes. And then I proceed. And so I feel like the balance between being able to do those two things, one things feed into another, is helping me stay centered most times. And that's it.
And so when I think of you saying, I understand it, but when I think of you saying that in response to a question about Womb Tomb, saying that you wanted to make work that gave you joy, there's something about the idea that makes me think of that contradiction of the joy of building a tomb that's kind of for yourself. So the same way with Mezuzah, because this is another centerpiece of the exhibition. Can you obviously beyond, like we heard in the video a little bit about, it was a response, of deep response to your feelings of wanting to disappear, and and sometimes that might be relating to the situation all of us find ourselves in this day and age, between pandemics and the last administration and other just challenges of life and life in Los Angeles. But it became building a tomb and the womb. There's obviously there's relations of the circular nature of that, of the renewal of the, it almost is that a reincarnation. But can you tell me a little bit about some of your thought processes of creating this cyclical womb and tomb?
Yeah. Well, I think so many thoughts are going through my head, so I'm going to try to focus them. A womb and a tomb, I think it's somewhere safe. It's somewhere where places that are safe, you can't, and outside of your control, there is nothing you could do. You just need to be there. So let's start with that. I make vessels and guardians. I like the relationship between strength and vulnerability. And the idea is that this is the strength in us and the vulnerability in us. And everything that I do will have cracks. And it's kind of like a metaphor to humans that are imperfect, perfectly imperfect, right? Our scars, our wrinkles, all of it, it's what makes us unique, and kind of surrendering to it, surrendering to our mortality, surrendering to our imperfection. It gives you a lot of comfort. It gives you, I think, a sense of peace. So this is just connecting with that place of peace inside, letting go and getting centered. I think this is what this is about. But I want to go back to the concept of joy. To me, joy is a place where you connect through hardship, through difficulties, through obstacles, and you pull through that, and then you get joy because you've done it, and you're feeling it in your body, like that's the kind of place I'm trying to connect with. And womb tomb is just that. I mean, when you go in there, it's very peaceful.
Yeah, you've had and at the beginning of the exhibition, some of our appointments, you invited visitors to climb in.
Yeah,
obviously, I'm sure a few more will climb in before the exhibition ends. So, the next question Anu has, I'll have two more, and then I'll go to the attendee Q&A. So, has your way of working with ceramics changed as a result of your interdisciplinary work? So you're working with, painting and things like that. Yeah.
Totally. And as I mentioned before, the clay is the beginning and the end. It's the bookend of everything I do. It's something that I constantly go back to. But I like to go and I crochet, I paint, I work, with the different materials. And sometimes those materials don't end up being an actual finished piece. There may be transitional pieces, which is fine. It's part of the process. But everything feeds everything. Some artists, they go from point A to point B to point C. I go like this. I don't know if you like more like 8 and circular kind of thing. So let me go this. And I repurpose sometimes, like I did in the show with the little stones, pieces that have been in the studio for a long time, and all of a sudden they say something else. So everything feeds into everything. The way I painted this affected the way I glazed, and the way I glazed affected the way I painted. And it's going to affect how I'm going to moving forward. It gives you, again, when things are not precious, it gives you a lot of freedom to just be and to kind of remove the intent of the process.
And so this leads into her final question, which you were just talking a little bit about. Can you address a little bit about and I think you've touched on it in some other ways about the feelings of the importance of some of these objects, but how remnants came into your work, how this, because there was in the last exhibition, we had a series of pieces called your intention series, where the clay was wrapped around, you can see the audience. I'm not going to pull up a picture right now, but if you go to the website to past exhibitions, you can see images of these pieces. Galia had uses these pieces that she uses in her kiln to what are they called again? Sorry.
The shelves.
Yeah, the kiln shelves. But sometimes just through age, or sometimes because of the size of the pieces, they'll eventually sometimes crack. And so she sort of looked at these things that helped her make the work, that contributed, were processes, and sort of like paid tribute to them by wrapping them in clay. And they were really it's a really fascinating series, and it continues in some form here with the small stones. With the small stones, those aren't pieces of kiln shelf, though, that are wrapped. Those are actual other pieces of clay that get wrapped in other clay. So yeah. Anyway, so I'm doing some explanation, but tell me a little bit about your connection to these remnants.
So those are you're referring to the little stone on the floor. Those were pieces of clay that broke from other pieces. And they were just sitting there in the studio for a while. But I think, let me pull back for a second. My goal when I work is to remove myself from the process. The process of making the work, removing intent, really removing myself, and kind of letting the work tells me what it needs to be, where it needs to go. So I think in relationship to those, they were there. They were saying this. They were saying to me, just wrap me, do this with me. And I think that my job is to be quiet and listen to what these pieces are telling me to do. And the more I remove myself from it, I feel like the better the work is, or the more successful the work is, or the more at peace I am with the work that came out. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, totally. I'm gonna we're heading towards being here an hour now, and I'm gonna slide into questions from our attendees. I know so many of you, and I appreciate you guys being here. I'm going to start with Adrienne Devine, who is anyway. Hello, Adrienne. It's great to have you on here. Hope to see you in person sometime this year. So anyway, so her first question is from Adrienne. The role of ritual is clear in how you make the sculptures and why. Can you talk about how rituals manifest in the making of your paintings? Is there physicality involved, or is it revealed more conceptually?
The making of the paintings was, okay, it's going to sound really weird. It's going to sound like granola eating, tree hugging person, which I'm not so much, but they took over. The painting took over. I pulled them up. I came in, I opened the jars, and I just started painting. It all was like something was coming to me and through me. It just needed to come out. And I made maybe 20 of these, and I just kept making them and making them and making them and repeating the same gesture, repeating it again and again and again. And it's very fast. I don't mix the paint. I work on the layers of the paint while they're still wet, so they're mixing with each other. And I kind of let the paint, kind of like I let the kiln do its own thing. It's like the paint was my partner in the making of it, and like the kiln is my partner in making the work. So it was a very almost like channeling something that needed to come out. I don't know. I know it
Yeah,
sounds
well,
weird,
I mean,
but that's what it
whether
was.
whether sometimes it might even feel like it's coming from outside of ourselves, like the channeling, that sort of intense concentration where it's flowing through. It's obviously we have powerful subconsciouses that have been working, that are dealing with all of our thoughts, and we've been concentrating on our work, and we are when we are deep into a projects practices, the more you get in touch with being able to bring out something like that. So the next question is from Nikki Green, who Nikki was in the Craft Biennial with Galia last year, and also did the conversation that's in the exhibition catalog. Nikki asks, can you speak more about the concept of legacy? You spoke about the legacy of the Bendix building. Do you think about your work in that way? What about the legacy, trajectory, passing down of Jewish ritual and practices?
Oh, wow, Nikki, that's a good question. I haven't never thought of the work as legacy. Going back to what we discussed at the beginning of the talk, is that well-behaved women do make history when they do the unexpected, and when they make and keep records, and then when future generations care. So I make work, and I have a sense that it has a place in the world, and we need to make and keep records. And this is actually one way of keeping records. So I really appreciate everybody being here. I am just starting to explore my relationship with tradition and rituals, Jewish rituals, and how it's all going to work together. So let's talk again in a couple of years when we do the next show, and then we can have another conversation, and I can maybe answer that better then.
All right. That's the answer she can give right now, Nikki. The next, Nellie King Solomon asks, love the taught origins of your works. As Jewish women artists who come out of architecture, do you feel we can somehow open up territories allowed to women through the work? The way the woman who built the Bendix opened up realms. I love that you bring her in and are teaching us about her as well.
I think that we have power and we have a voice, and it should be heard. One of the things that we're doing in the residency, that's not necessarily about architecture, but it's about the artist residency. I believe that women have a right for resources, for opportunities, and we need to support each other, I think it's kind of fun to support each other through that. Florence, one of the things that she did, she was actually meeting monthly with 50 other business women, and they're all creative, successful business women, and they just hang out once a month because that's how they would support each other and have fun together. And I think that's important to do. Big groups, small groups, we could do that, and we can make a difference. And
I'm going to skip down to Nellie had a second question. I'm going to bring that up now because it's a bit related, and it's sort of, since it's a second question from her. She says, architecture, Judaism, skyscraper development, such historical male zones, vulnerability, cracks, womb, clay wrapping, female zones. I feel you're onto something, remaking the first with the hand and materials of the latter. Do you feel the channeling is a kind of reconciling the former with the latter as women makers? Interesting.
Okay, I need to think about this. Shaina Nistambrod wrote, when she wrote about the show, she used what did she say? She said, aggressively, I don't remember. Maybe you can find it. I don't know. But we're both. We have both feminine and masculine, and they don't in each and every one of us. And sometimes this is more dominant. Sometimes the other one is more dominant. And it's not this one or that one. It's the combination and the relationship of both of them coming together. I think that's what makes a difference. And I think that's what I'm trying to do with my work. It's definitely feminine and masculine.
Mm-hmm.
It's also, so that's bringing that thing together and being aggressive in pink. And that's how it comes together.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I don't have it in front of me, but Shayna did have an interesting way of putting that the other day.
I'll find it. Just a minute. I'll find it. Okay, but we can continue.
Next question from Andrea Nuch. We have, let's see.
Oh, here's the thing. She uses fierce masculine forms painted in aggressively feminine colors.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what we're talking about.
Yeah, it definitely cuts through to it. So Andrea asks, do you think this is a breakthrough and a personal quest achieved through your practice? So it's interesting to think, well, because you're constantly, I'm pontificating slightly on this, but it's artists are constantly trying to make breakthroughs and constantly working, but like you have to. So, but obviously this is this solo show is different from many other things you've made. There's a lot of different things. So yeah, so it is a straightforward question. Do you think of this as a breakthrough?
Do you?
I
not you. I'm saying Andrea. Look, I think you can't cross the same river twice because you're not the same person, and the water is not, and the river is not the same, right? So I think that's an important thing. You change every now and then. I don't feel like it's up to me to decide if this is a breakthrough or not. I feel like this show, I had something to say and I said it. And I do have to say that there was a thing in my mind that said, there's a lot of intimate things here and there's a lot of vulnerability. And I feel like I kind of allow myself to do that, to experience it, to share it, to do this. I don't know if this is a breakthrough. I feel like that's not for me to say. No?
Yeah, maybe you don't. Maybe it's not something you want to have to say out loud or think of yourself. But obviously, you may not approach it that way. But Andrea also added after I read her question out loud. She says, "I do." She thinks it's a breakthrough.
Thank you.
And I think the way you approached how you wanted to develop this show was a breakthrough for you for sure. And so I think that approach, shaped this world that you've created. So. Ashwini has the next question. She says, so glad to have seen the show in person. Could you talk a little bit about the self-portraits with 2 braids? Obviously, there's 2 pieces. There's self-portrait with 2 braids, and there's self-portrait with 1 braid.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Part of my process is and it's connected to architecture. I take the floor plan and the elevation of the gallery, and I do layout after layout and elevation after elevation. And you saw some of those sketches in the video to kind of process to how I want to place the objects to create that place of ritual. And I've always started, the first 2 objects I placed is those 2 tapestries. Even though I knew that to me, they're the most intimate pieces in the show, and very different than everything that I've ever done. And, you had these voices in your head telling you, they don't belong, all of it. But then they kept coming up. I had to put them in the show. So these drapes were in my house, and there's watermarks and dirt and when I took them down, like I said, to try and get them clean, and then I looked at them again, it's like these objects were there when I was living my life for almost 12 to 15 years. So I don't want to erase myself. I felt like if I would dry clean them, I would erase a part of myself. And I didn't want to do that.
And the incorporation of the horsehair braids, that a lot of people, see knowing your hair, they look at them and go, oh my, is that Galia's hair? And then they realize or never figure out, maybe they never figure out that it's horsehair. But so can you talk about the incorporation?
Well, it's definitely because these are self-portraits, and I've always had long hair ever since I was a little girl. And so that's why I don't know how to explain. I mean, they're part of me, so that's my hair out there. Mm-hmm. I mean, these drapes saw a lot, and I feel like it's all imbued in them. Like, buildings have energy, objects have energy. It's imbued in them, and I just wanted to have it up there. So,
I think I'm gonna slide towards a finish. I think we've gone through the questions. There's a couple comments in the Q&A part, but they weren't questions. So I think I'm so sorry that Anu couldn't be here. And again, for anybody who know her, we did share updates. It's her and her family are all okay. It's just they had a emergency earlier today. So, and I'm not even sure if I introduced myself when it started. I'm Sean Meredith. I'm the director of Track 16. And it's been really great to have Galia here. And so this show that you all know the title of, so by now, Heartbreaker, Beauty Queen, Heartbreaker, and High Maintenance. It opened a few weeks ago, and it still has 3-4 weeks left. It's open till March 20th. And so many of you are not going to actual galleries these days. And so on our website, there is a lot of material for you to experience the show there, whether installation shots, checklist, and a VR walkthrough. For anybody who does want to come and visit the show in person, all the appointments are private and distance. So if you make an appointment, you're the only person having an appointment at that time. And I stay in the back. I can talk to you if you have questions, but we open up a window. And so we have air coming through, and we keep mask and distance, and we have hand sanitizers, of course. So, and you can park right under the Bendix building in the garage in the basement. So if you come up the stairs, you don't have to walk on the street or anything like that. So you can pretty much stay to yourself. So if you would like to come, please visit the website to make an appointment. We'd be happy to have you come experience. Luckily, in a world where we're supposed to be, safe as possible, art galleries are usually pretty quiet affairs. So you're welcome to come visit us. Also, through the website or on our web shop is the exhibition catalog. Galia and I are both really proud of how it came out, and we would love any of you guys to have it. Shipping is free in the United States, and so you can just order it for click and ship. But we have copies here if you came by. And then I think lastly, what I'd want to say also is we've been able to sell a lot of the building blocks, the pieces that are in the back, these amazing vessels Galia created kind of as tests, experiments, this series of 36 building blocks. And so we've been selling those as a way of raising money for the new residency that's at Blue Roof. So, the first resident is going to be getting their residency this summer at Art at Blue Roof. And, it's eligible for, can you tell about the eligibility of this again, Galia?
You mean what the residency provides?
Yeah. Well, who's eligible to get it?
Women identified artists of all disciplines.
Yeah.
And they get a 3-month studio space, 1-month exhibition space, a monthly stipend, and Elisa is building a mentorship network around each artist to really amplify the artist's voice. And but the also interesting thing is that we decided to apply a really broad definition of what an artist is. So you don't need to go to art school, and you don't have to have necessarily a studio practice already. The whole idea is that if you don't, we're offering that to you. And so if you're a quilt maker and you're really committed to your practice, then you're the right person to apply. And I think Lisa mentioned that it's going to get, the first resident is going to come in June or July.
And so, and then so it's open to people who live, like to women and women
in District 9.
In District 9 in South LA,
9.
so around Blue Roof.
Yeah.
And then, so anyway, so if anybody's welcome to contact me about these building blocks if they want to help contribute towards the raising money for the residency, but also the building blocks themselves are actually available right on our web shop where we sell the books. So you'd be able to look at a picture and like one and support the residency. So, thank you so much to Anu, who couldn't be here, who shaped a lot of some of the conversation, and then also for her work, you know, with the essay. And thank you, Galia, for doing this. And thanks to her husband Oded did the music for the video at the beginning, and I'm appreciative of what he did for that too. So.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Okay. It's a beautiful Sunday, everybody. I hope you guys all have a great one. Okay. All right. That's a wrap, I guess. Bye, everybody.
Yeah. Bye.